business owners and professionals have added their voice in giving recommendations to the nation's healing process after the brutal political season. While speaking during a press briefing in Nairobi, the group's chairman, Matiang'i, said it was imperative that the nation now looked forward in coming together and reconciling differences, while taking the opportunity to relay his congratulatory messages to the head of state, President Uhuru Kenyatta. He also mentioned some of the steps that would lead to the nation's healing.
The business fraternity has lost billions of shillings during the period of political uncertainty. For instance, foreign investors kept away from investing in the country, which led to negative impact on the entire economy. Destructive acts such as burning of vehicles, pelting of stones at innocent bystanders and the police not only affected local businesses, but also threatened the well-being of innocent Kenyans. To progress as a nation, we must learn to coexist together peacefully and within the confines of respect. The culture of impunity, blatant disregard of the law, and infringement of other people's rights should stop. People that participated in committing atrocities during the just concluded election period should be held to account in accordance with the law. This will start the national healing process in a manner that will enable affected victims to seek justice and restitution.
Well, we want to get more insights from Ken Gishinga, the chief economist at Mentoria Consulting, joining us now live in our studios. And Ken, it's been an interesting week of sorts. We've seen preparations for the swearing in top gear. And really, what does this mean for Kenya, especially now that the opposition leader has a big statement he'll be making tomorrow?
Well, thanks for having me. That event is called the Assumption of Office, and it's quite significant in the life of a democracy because it's the process upon which power is either handed over or power is retained by an incumbent. It becomes also the central stage upon which world powers recognize the head of state of Kenya. So from a stability perspective, it's very good in the sense that you've already seen the markets responding to that. But as I said last week, I think there's still far more issues around national cohesion, which needs to take place way after the assumption of office.
All right. Speaking about assumption of office, we've seen in Harare the former vice president taking over as the main man. Perhaps what does this signify for African economies?
I think that was a thunderbolt moment, if you ask me. For many people who are younger than 37 years in Zimbabwe, they do not know any other president in their life. So this is almost like Kenya back in 2002. That sense of euphoria, that sense of anything is possible. On the other side, people say that ZANU, the party, is still the party in power. So when they say the more things change, and the more things remain the same. So I think it's going to be wait and see, because in the sense that the deputy is supposed to follow in the similar footsteps. I don't think it's going to have radically different policies because the policies are set up by the political party, which in Southern Africa, Zimbabwe, it's quite more mature than in East Africa. So I think it's going to be, in as much as there are celebrations, I think it's going to be some time before we see some dramatic shifts in terms of the economic policies, particularly on the land policy, which has been the most protracted.
Oh, right. Most controversial. And let's come closer home. CBK today did have a press conference, and one of the key issues that the governor did mention is in relation to the stability of the economy, indicating that the macroeconomic fundamentals remain steady, and the Monetary Policy Committee did not see any reason really to raise the lending rate from the current 10%. What do you read out of this?
We have to put it into perspective. Monetary policy is one wing of economic policy. The other wing is fiscal policy, which the Treasury is in charge of. Monetary policy, they control liquidity in the market by either raising interest rates or lowering interest rates. And what they say today is they've looked at inflation, they've looked at the sectors, and he said the services sector appear to be especially vibrant. And they look at many indicators. I know they look at more than 100 variables, in as much as they say it's inflation, but they have a committee that looks at over 100 variables. So I think and it's a committee that has about 6-7 people. So I think in their wisdom, in their collective wisdom, they have seen there's no need to shake the markets. things, the political cycle is coming to an end. Let's maintain some stability. On the other hand, there are people who actually critique if monetary policy can function when there's an interest rate cap. And there's some technical reasons why that might not be the case. Because if you look at the banks, they can't lend more than 4% above the central bank rate, which is 14% today. Mm-hmm. So if you increase the central bank rate to 11%, it means banks can't lend more than 15%. Mm-hmm. But that actually creates more liquidity in the market because it increases the threshold which banks can lend. So there's an upside-down effect that the rate cap actually introduces, which technocrats need to look at. But I don't think it's something that will, from what I hear, will be staying for too long.
And from the MPC, they also did mention that credit uptake has gone up by 2% compared to 1.7%. And is this a good place to be, especially we're seeing SMEs saying there's been a credit slowdown?
No, I think we are finally going in the right direction. We are not where we need to be. The credit supply needs to be growing at 20%. So even if you have gone from 1.5, 1.7 to 2%, we are still almost 18% away from where we should be. So I think I expect it to be almost another year before we get to that robust, vibrant economy that we saw in 2010.
All right. And just before we close it off, Ken, one of the other big developments through the week, we did see the Safaricom stock hitting a high of nearly 26 shillings for the share. And it's the highest that we've seen the stock rally despite the prevailing political situation around the Safaricom brand, bearing in mind that it was one of the companies that was targeted by NASA as they announced the boycott calls. Perhaps, is this a show of resilience or a markets will correct eventually? Well,
there are two forces at play. Last week I told you that the country's fundamentals are very attractive. And if the Supreme Court upheld the victory of President Uhuru Kenyatta, we would see markets reacting that way. Sure. So that's one piece. The second piece is Safaricom is a very innovative company. I mean, right now they're launching one of the biggest e-commerce attempts, Masoko, which is, I think, launching today. And I think what I'm hearing, it's already trending in terms of it's going to take on uptake. It's going to take on the big e-commerce firms. So you combine a positive macroeconomic outlook and a very innovative company, then obviously, no matter what boycotts are sort of like introduced, we are going to see that company doing very well.
All right. Many thanks, Ken Kishinga. Pleasure speaking to you.
Always a pleasure.
All right. And we'll be looking at matters to do with also the NSC performance as well as how the shilling continues to perform. We'll be speaking to Ken. He'll be still hanging around and we'll cross over to him later on in the second part of